senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, Michael Bociurkiw, who has visited the bombed-out city of Chernihiv and the capital, Kyiv. Michael, always good to talk. Russia has now begun this offensive that they have been talking about for several days in Donbas. Just how big is the presence there and the bombardment taking place?
Good to be with you. It's a very, very big area. And, you know, as you and I have talked so many times about the Donbass, it's a pretty big area. That front line, actually, that the Russians are attacking right now as we speak is equivalent roughly halfway the distance between Sydney and Melbourne, to give your viewers an idea. Now, remember that in the Donbass, the Russian-backed combatants have been there for almost 8 years now. So in that time, taking advantage of a pretty much open border with Russia, they've been able to bring in all kinds of armaments and technology. They know the lay of the land. And this battle coming up will be very, very different from what we've seen earlier. We're at day 54 now. But for the first 25 or so days, a lot of the fighting was focused on urban combat, Kharkiv, Mariupol, places like that. But this is more kind of open level territory. Your viewers will be familiar with the scenes from M817, you know, those sunflower and wheat fields. That's the kind of terrain we're talking about right now. So it'll be more almost eyeball-to-eyeball combat, open field tank battles, that sort of thing. Very, very different, but of course, a lot of potential for huge destruction and further death and injuries, I'm afraid.
Yeah, which is so disturbing. So, you know, it's been so surprising at how well the Ukrainian forces have been able to withstand the Russian onslaught. As you say, this is so different. How will they be able to mount an effective resistance here?
Well, big problem now, Bev, is actually no region of Ukraine is safe as we speak, because the Russians have those long-range cruise missiles, exactly like the 4 or 5 that struck Lviv yesterday morning, in which 7 people died and many were injured. So what Ukraine needs right now, not only in the Donbass area, but all over the country, is the ability to control its skies. And it doesn't have that ability right now. It has a enhanced capability since the beginning of the war. So that is why Ukraine is pleading for technology and more sophisticated weaponry from the West, missile batteries that can target those high-flying, fast and very distant missiles coming in from Russia. By the way, the missiles that came here in Lviv, not far from where I sit right now, flew over 1,000, well over 1,000 kilometers from inside Russia near the Caspian Sea. So that's the kind of targeting capability they have. And just an advisor to the president said this morning, which I said last week, is that, again, no area of Ukraine is safe right now because of that.
And you're still hearing reports even near the capital still. You know, the question of how much military aid is given to Ukraine remains, a difficult answer, because they can't provide the sort of air support that Zelenskyy wants. There's also the question, Michael, does it reinforce Russia's aggression here, the more military that is provided to Ukraine?
Well, you know, I think at the end of the day, the West has to decide where its red lines are and what type of spine it has. If at every turn, whenever Mr. Putin says, well, if this sort of thing continues, shipments of Western armaments to Ukraine, we may use nuclear weapons or biological or chemical weapons. And in a way, this is a blackmail. And I think unless the West acts very quickly and agrees to Mr. Zelenskyy's, I believe, very sensible shopping list, we're going to have countless more deaths here in Ukraine. The fear is here now because of the kind of situation I've outlined to you. The fear here now is that they may be, after the total destruction of Ukraine, that they could be aiming for another Syria. And the reason I say that even more strongly today, Bev, is because there's also been reports of Russia carpet bombing Mariupol with those long-range fighter airplanes, those airplanes that can carry a lot of missiles. So that's a very, very significant development, if true. But it just goes to show you how little regard they have for civilian lives here, and how far they're prepared to go.
Yeah, and you know, the death toll now is over 2,000 civilians. We don't know the forces. You talk about that Mariupol, it's been a kind of still resistant in small pockets to the Russian demands now to surrender. How critical is Mariupol in terms of whether there are any further negotiations between the two sides?
Yeah, it's very critical. From the Ukrainian side, of course, I mean, it used to have a population equal to the city of Miami. Right now, I think there are about 100,000 people left there, and it's a city under siege. I mean, we're hearing horrific stories of how people are sheltering in place in basements and don't have electricity, food, that sort of thing. To the Ukrainians, Mariupol was a very important commercial port city, but to the Russians, they need Mariupol in order to link the Russian mainland with Crimea, which they've been trying to do for quite some time. And also, Mariupol has been basically the base of the feared Azov battalion, who are very, kind of hardy fighters and have been putting up a big battle. And Mr. Putin would like nothing more than to wipe them out as well. But again, it doesn't matter to them how many civilians die in this sort of war effort. The numbers, I'm afraid, are going to get a lot worse as we get into 60, 70 days of this war campaign.
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking. And you visited Chernihiv last week. Take us through some of what you witnessed.
Yeah. Sure. Well, we were taken there by Ukrzaliznytsia, the state-owned rail company, which, by the way, has been doing an incredible job moving a lot of migrants and refugees around the country and cargo during the war. And we saw horrific images of complete neighborhoods flattened. We visited a soccer stadium. Again, civilian infrastructure. Why bomb it? It was heavily bombed. What can't be used again? Next to it, a children's library, also bombed to shreds. We saw, Bev, in the residential neighborhood we visited, lots of bomb craters, and we estimated them to be between 250 to 500-pound bombs right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Shredded teddy bears, destroyed toys. It looked, it's a scene apocalyptic that I haven't seen before. It seemed to us as a cross almost between a hurricane and a fire and a war on top of all of that. That bad, complete devastation. And the people told us they need two things right now. One is peace, but the other is roof over their head. So anything Western countries such as Australia can do to help Ukraine build semi-permanent housing would go a long way to helping people like the ones from Chernihiv.
Yeah, and thank you for that vision that you brought back with you. Just heartbreaking, as you pointed out, those shredded teddy bears. Michael, thank you so much for being so close to what is going on, for sharing it with us tonight. Thank you.
My pleasure.